Okay, and welcome back to the 2020 Mind Hack of Mr. Tim Ferriss. So, how does this person make more money? For this person to make more money, they work longer. How does this person make more money? They have more people, show up and task out to them. For Tim Ferriss to make more money, he increases the frequency. For Tim to make less money, he decreases the frequency. Now, if you just give that tiny little bit, that's cool. Now, the thing is, you can't just pull that out and put it in business. This has to become part of your life. Listen to the way he tells stories. He'll tell stories, he just doesn't go from point A to point B. He goes from point A, before he can get to point B, he goes through a couple different little side notes, and they all fit in. Then from B to C, again, he takes a few little side trips, and they still fit in. He doesn't just laboriously tell you one thing that leads into the next thing, that leads into the next thing, that leads into the... He does have step by step, but he also has lots of little side adventures in each step by step. The little side adventures, again, this is how he processes the world. He's okay with side adventures. Most people who run duration the way that he runs frequency aren't good with side adventures. They've got to stay on target for a long length of time. And if they want to succeed more, they've got to put more time in. Which means it's either going to be 3 months of 40 hours a week, or it's going to be a month and a half of 80 hours a week. And you know that doesn't work. So, because that gets exhausting. Versus Tim gets to play at all these little he gets to play anytime he's not working. And he only works during these little tiny bits. So what's he do if he's not working? What motivates him? What's going on in there? Let's switch gears a little tiny bit. Most people, when most people model, they do this. You can either move towards a carrot or away from a stick. And that's where they stop. This is where we're going to begin. Of course you can move towards a carrot or away from a stick. Tim, primarily, at least 80% of Tim's mind is focused moving towards things. He sees something, he moves towards it and pokes it. He sees something, he moves around in a little bit of a different way and he pokes it. He sees something, he moves around in yet another different way and he pokes it. That's what he does at least 80% of the time. So we've got mostly towards going on with him. Second thing, with motivation, there's 3 little areas we can play with here. So draw a little box. Second, internal or external. Let's go back to the silver star syndrome. The teacher would draw something up on the board. The teacher, that's external, that's outside. Teacher would ask a question. The teacher would tell you to give the answer. All this is external. And then you get to feel good because the teacher told you you were right and you can feel good now. Tim does a tremendous amount of internal work. Back and forth, he sees something, he makes a picture, he goes inside, he looks at it a little bit differently inside of his mind. He amps up, he speeds up his voice, his breathing. He pokes it. Sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively. But he's got a lot of internal work going on here. Most people need a boss telling them what to do. Tim doesn't. He goes inside and he plays. He figures out what are the new rules, what can he do, what the existing rules on the outside, what are the exploits that he can bring in. The tiny little things that can make a difference. So Tim runs mostly towards, mostly internal. Third little parameter, and we'll just put that right here. And again, this multiplies his effectiveness. This is really cool. Life can be either a game or life can be a war. When I listen to Tim's stories, when I try on his breathing, when I notice how he blinks, Tim has a life that's mostly a game. It's mostly a dance. Now, it's not like this now. He made it this way so he could get the success and generate the methods that he had. At one point in time, Tim was probably at war, but not nearly as much as most people do. Now, here's what happens. Most people are running a lot of war. They're trying. Now, if life is a war to them, if that's the kind of story that they run, they can play to win the war. They can play not to lose the war. Okay, positive and negative, towards and away. So he can put, somebody else, this is not Tim, somebody else could have life being a war and play to win the war. I'm sorry, not play, but go to war and try to win. Okay, somebody who's at war could try not to lose. Either way, positive or negative, it's still about a war. Somebody else running external, okay, running external, letting someone else dictate when they get to be happy, what they have to do, what they get to see. Tim runs tons of towards, internal. He sets his goals. He determines his methods. Okay, and life's a game. He figures out little wee exploits. That way he doesn't have to stay on the timeline. Now, put all this together. This is just a very basic introduction. We could take Tim apart for 8 hours, and we could play little games to try little bits of him on. Here's how this all works. We don't just do what Tim does. We don't pretend to be Tim. If we just try to do what Tim does, we're probably going to go out here to the world of content. In other words, thoughts. Or we'll try to outsource. We'll try to be outrageous. We'll buy the shoes that he has. We'll do unorthodox things like, like weigh in at a real light weight and then rehydrate and be 30 pounds heavier so we can push the guy off the stage for the martial arts competition. We'll consider those things, but we probably won't do them. And if we do, they just won't work right because we don't have the process. Process is a good 80-90% of the game. We have to adopt little bits of his process. Now there's a couple things to think about here. If you want to play with this stuff, the first thing is becoming aware of process. Most people are only aware of content. If most people, when I talk to them and I say, close your eyes and tell me about your internal visual world, they will tell me about a swing set, or a puppy, or a tree. They'll tell me content. Some people, and these are the rare ones who access process, they'll close their eyes and I'll say, tell me about your internal visual world. And they'll say, I see movies, they're color. I'm in them. I'm not in them. I see still images. All of this is the area of process. This is where we want to play. If we try to force it all in here, it's not going to work. If on the other hand we tend to play here, this is fun. The person who runs mostly away from, if we try to change their content, we've got to give them a bigger away from. If the person runs mostly towards, we've got to give them a bigger towards. Again, this is where most people stop when it comes to motivation. This is all they know. Towards and away. But if we start playing with these variables, we unleash the power in motivation. We unleash an energy in them which is just absolutely tremendous. So, steps to take. 1, listen to these recordings again and again and again. Okay, you'll learn little bits about Tim's motivation. You'll learn little bits about the way Tim processes and perceives the world. The more you notice, the more you're going to catch. One of the things that we bring up in a lot of our trainings is this. The mentoring relationship. It's not just about learning what they know. Okay, that's a little tiny bit. You can learn this in college. You can learn this from an ebook. You can learn this from the 4-hour work week. This is what he knows. But if we want to catch, this can be taught. Okay? Content can be taught. Process has to be caught. You've got to hang out with people to catch them. So becoming aware of this does 2 things. 1, you've hung out with this. By just hanging out with this is going to change the way you think about everything forever. Because where most people are still just going to track content, you may start to notice process a little differently. 2, you want to hang out physically, if at all possible, with these kinds of people. I enjoy listening to Tim because as I listen to him, I catch how he perceives the world. I'm trained in this. I'm trained in NLP. I'm trained in shapeshifting. Okay, Native American stuff and NLP. I've had the opportunity to combine them and literally really get the shape that he perceives through. Never pretend to be him. Learn the shape that he perceives through. These are all filters. This is the way that he perceives. We'll be back in just a moment.